Welcome back to the podcast. Jeff isn't working. I'm your host, Jeff Schroeder, joined with my guest, longtime friend, fellow intern,
Wow.
Rockford, Illinois. Not there now, but that's where we met. Eddie Nesby. Welcome to the show.
What's up, baby?
What's
What's
going on, man?
Jeffrey Allen Boyce Johnson Schroeder?
Yes, 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 yes.
Hmm.
So tell the folks where you are now. We met in Rockford, but you're far from there right now. Where are you at right now?
I'm in the Southwest, Las Cruces, New Mexico. No, there is a state in the Union called New Mexico. It's part of the Lower 48. It's on the border of Texas and Arizona. We're right below Colorado, and right above what you know as Mexico.
Yeah.
We're right on the border of El Paso, Texas, and Juarez, Mexico. So,
Wow. Wow. And so before moving there, had you had any experience in the southwestern part of the country at all?
yeah, I did my first job out of Rockford was actually Las Vegas. So I took a job in Las Vegas, Nevada. I was youth pastor for about 10 months and
Whoa.
loved it. Loved it.
Wait, I don't imagine Las Vegas having churches at all.
You'd be surprised how many
Yeah.
churches are in the city of Las Vegas.
I do know Gene Apple was from Vegas. Were you affiliated with that church? The church that Gene Apple was?
Nah, but I've been to that church though.
Okay. Okay.
As a part of that particular fellowship. Uh,
Wow.
but loved it, bro. It was the best time and the worst time in my entire life. Uh
Really?
then moved back to Illinois. Yeah. It
Okay, well,
was
let's start at the beginning. Let's start at the beginning because I feel like you have such an interesting story, even from when I met you, and I don't know much of what happened after Rockford, so I'm excited to hear that part. But excuse me, let's start at the beginning. You have a famous parent,
you can say that.
Ann Nesby. Um, I didn't know how big she was until my gay friends found out that I knew you, who
Oh,
have your mom, and they were like, "Oh my God."
yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's real. It's big. So, but what was that like? I mean, what was it like having a mother who is essentially a gospel singer, but crossover as well? I mean,
Well, she's like that. You know how there's you've got the mother of soul, like the godmother of soul.
yeah.
Um, her title, a lot of people would say she would be the godmother of inspirational soul, which is
Okay.
that between the gospel message and like straight up soul and R&B.
Yeah.
So the dynamics of a song that speaks to the soul of your life spiritually, but she's gonna also talk about the cheating husband and
Right.
she's not with him no more. You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
it's more, I feel like there's just more life to it. It's not pigeonholed. But she's speaking to the realities of people's life as a, hey, I go to church on a Sunday, but on Monday I still got to pay these bills and deal with this man. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And
it's
I think historically they did kind of categorize it like Christian versus like just soul. There wasn't a lot of overlap there because I think there were some rules with like the Christian stuff. You had to,
you
you
had
know,
to have this man.
right, right, right.
So they were technically under the gospel category, but black music is a little bit different than your fine painted lines of Billboard charting
Sure.
out. She's more of a genre bender
Yeah.
because all the music, although it's soul, which a lot of soul singers have their music do this, is they become house voices. But my mother has been huge underground house music. I
Yeah.
think that's kept relevant even today, where younger people can go, "Oh, I've heard that before," because if they're into the scene, it's still rocking. Like we almost moved to France because her music was so big in Europe that my mother was like, my seventh grade year, like we were
Wow.
like from the hood to like, yo, we are thinking about moving to like Paris, France, and we French, and but I was like, and they rethought it, and that's how they got to Atlanta. So
Okay.
they moved to Atlanta instead.
And but you
Mhm.
didn't go with them to Atlanta. You stayed in Rockford.
No, I did.
Oh, you did. Oh,
So,
you did.
well, here's I I did summers in Rockford from like 4 until 6th grade. Because they moved to Minneapolis because of the Sons of Blackness, which is the group.
Yeah.
Um, and so I stayed. We were in Minneapolis, and I would do summers when they would go on tour. And there's a couple moving times we moved inside of that. I moved my biological father to Los Angeles and came back. And then they did a year-long tour, the Power Love Tour with Luther Vandross. And I moved to Illinois for like 8 months, kind of a deal.
Okay.
Um, and then I went back and then to Minneapolis. And then through 7th grade, they were like, hey, we're going to France. And it was like, well, we thought about it. We want to stay close to family. We're moving to Atlanta. Because they could get more for their money in Atlanta, and they built a home and they've been
Yeah.
there since then. So yeah, bro.
Yeah, you've been around. You've been around.
Dog, been around. I went to school there, and that's how we met because I attended the school, private school I was attached to,
Yeah.
attending.
How long did you go to school there? Did you went there in your high school or eighth grade?
I started 8th grade, went through high school.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I went there 6th grade. Funny when they went to 6th grade and legit stayed from September to December and was like, "Yo, it's too many white people." Like I'm shit. Was mad white here. I love it. I had the time of my life. Love going to church with y'all. But I'm going home. Like it was kind of like shell shock.
Yeah.
Um, home, loved it, and then I moved to Atlanta, and it was kind of the same effect. It was like, yo, there's black people and white people, but this is the South, and we lived on the kind of the white side of the tracks, and we were like the first of 10 houses, and I was like, yeah, I can't do white and the South, so
Yeah.
go back to what I know, and you know what I'm saying. I'm be on the South side of Rockford still, but then the private school kick was like, hey, this feels safe, and that was I what really started the conversation of them leaving was that summer between my sixth and fifth and sixth grade year. One of my best friends was killed by a stray bullet in our
Wow.
neighborhood. I mean, just around the corner from where we live. We did all of us did that same patch of land every day,
Yeah.
cousin to hang out, and he was killed. And so that conversation kind of pushed them into going, hey, we got to get out of here. And so going back to Rockford was like, hey, it's safe. I can still go to private school. And that was kind of like okay, I think I want to settle.
Who did you live with when you lived here?
My grandmother and my grandfather.
Okay. Okay.
So
And when did they lived up here the whole time or were they
yeah,
around too?
no, they stayed around. I mean, my grandfather's still a pastor. He's the longest tenured pastor in Rockford, Illinois, good or bad,
Whoa. Where at?
50 something years now.
What
Macedonia,
church?
Macedonia Baptist Church,
Oh
1720
shit. Shout out.
AKA 1720 Reverend Perry Bennett Way. He a
There
G.
you go. Yeah.
Ministry in Rockford, son. Don't mess
Stop
with him.
by and see him. Stop by and see him.
He older than been preaching though. He 80 something in the pulpit. Let's that stuff
So
down.
your mother was raised by a pastor. She was a daughter of a pastor. So she came up through the church.
Yeah, I mean they stayed in church. I mean, he started off working at Caterpillar,
Okay.
and Caterpillar retired from Caterpillar. Was a youth pastor, and before that was a boxer. So
Wow.
he was a Golden Glove champion. So and felt like he got a call because they were as children they grew up in Louisiana. When they became of age, they moved to the south side of Chicago.
Okay.
And so from south side of Chicago to Joliet, from Joliet to where my dad took his first church. So
Yeah.
he took church, his first and only church, and he took that position. He's been there ever since.
Wow.
And so
That's awesome.
they lived in 2 houses that I can remember. They've only lived in the 2 houses that I can remember, but they had others. They owned other homes, and he owns other homes, but it was just like we here. So
Yeah.
they might be the only black family on the block at this point. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, Little Mexico,
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Shout out to Vic Monster, all the
hey,
guys on the south side of
come
Rockford.
on. So that's
Excuse me. So did you also come up in church? I mean, did you were
yeah,
there every
we
day?
did. Man, I mean, I'm
Excuse
a typical like black pastor's kid. Use at church for choir rehearsal, district meeting. You had Bible study on Wednesdays. My schedule was Wednesday was Tuesday night was like some choirs my mom would be doing, and then Wednesday night was Bible study and prayer meeting, and then Thursday was like mass choir. Saturday was like youth choir practice, and then Sunday night if they had a special guest. So
Yeah.
I just grew up in church. When we were in Atlanta, it was a little. When we were in Georgia, I'm sorry, when we were in Minnesota, it was a little more loose. Like we would, I don't ever remember us being a member of a church, but there were like 5 or 6 churches that we would frequent,
Yeah.
like just a part of, and it was like usually lots of musicians. My uncle Charles had he was like an associate pastor at a church, and then all of these musicians that played together, and my mom was a part of that
Yeah.
group. They would just kind of rotate around. But then when I was probably like in the 5th grade, they got, they their life kind of changed like real drastically. And they got like real invested. Not that they were like wilding out, but there were some things in their life that was like, they're like, yo, we gotta figure this out. And they got settled and then they kind of like, we settled and went there. And then when they moved, they started going to Creflo Dollar's church in Atlanta.
Oh yeah. Wow.
So
Did you ever feel any like ill feelings about? I mean, what was that experience like? Was it
it
couldn't
was
have always been like, man, I'm so excited to go to church tonight.
nah. I had a little bit of a love-hate relationship with church. Um and it kind of like came to a head when like I was like in high school, right? Like believe it or not, like I was invested in the youth ministry because it was like it just felt good. Like
Yeah.
it was community, it was expressive, thoughtful, and I was just invested. But I had a love-hate relationship because of my biological father. So my biological father was a minister, a pastor in Rockford. But because of some decisions that he made morally and disrupted our family, disrupted the church, he took off and just kind of disappeared out of my life when I was real, like I was a baby,
Oh
and
wow.
took another. And then they went to California, and she like kind of had to escape and come back to Illinois.
Wow.
So she kept us in church, my grandfather's church. My grandfather was like, I feel like my grandfather was like the best until I turned 12. He was like, "Hey, I made you little niggas go on somewhere until you can take this." I was like, "Yo, chill." um, but I had that like some of the men in my life, and I'm not blaming my grandfather. I'm just going. Some of the men in my life were distant, and they were ministers.
Yeah.
They were ministers, and I didn't have a picture of my father as the pastor, even though everybody else knew of his gifts and his talents and abilities because he could preach and teach, and he was like had businesses, and he was the first NAAC president in Rockford, Illinois, and so there's all of this good stuff, and then there's like this all of this like sinister backstory of
Yeah.
who he was, and but my mother never talked bad about him ever. My mother never talked bad about him. I heard all the stories that like my siblings would tell me, "Hey, this is what it was, or this is how it was, or this is how we got treated," and I heard nothing like that from my mother until recently, this last couple of years of like, "Hey, this is what really happened. Let me talk you through it." But she never wanted me to see him in the light of his failure, but in the light of what God had kind of used him to do. So
Wow.
to
That's
because I was
incredible.
choosing this path. But as a sophomore at a Christian Life Chapel and having a conversation with Pastor Kevin Kringle, shout out to BK. He was like, "Yeah, Eddie, why you keep backing out?" And I was like, "Because and my verbiage to him was, I've seen what ministry, and I didn't sing, I didn't really sing until after I graduated high school.
Right.
People thought I could sing until I graduated from high school. And it was me going, hey, like I've seen the trash of this. I've lived in the house where hurt's been done by ministers, and I don't know that I want that. And he was like, "That's why you're called." And I was like, "That don't make sense to me."
Right.
And
Right.
and
Yeah.
even in my internship, I I struggled deeply because of it. You know, not only that, but being black in a white context,
Yeah.
um, dealing with the dynamics and the complexities of the feeling of being abandoned by my father. And then when people say, "Hey, you're pursuing ministry," man, you're more like your dad than any of his other children. And to me, that was like a backhanded compliment.
Right. Right.
But they were going, hey, the best, and they never used the phrase like the best of what he was. That's what you are. It was like, oh, you're just like your dad. And I'm just going, I don't know, dude. You know him more than I know,
Right.
but
Right.
I know him don't like. So why would you say, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a very similar relationship with my, or had, he's passed now, but with my biological father. And afterward, when he passed away, my uncle Danny, who I met maybe a handful of times, was like, would you mind speaking at his funeral? I'm like, you don't want me to say what I'm going to say at dude's funeral because you know him totally different. I don't know him at all. And I'll say that. Like, I don't know this dude,
Yeah.
So yeah, I know I get exactly what you're saying. And it's like people think it's a compliment to be like, you're a chip off the old block. It's like, I'm
No,
nothing like that, dude.
nothing. And I think that the goodness of people's hearts are going, you're the best of what he was.
Right. Absolutely.
It was a conversation with my mother, and my father passed away 2019.
Okay.
He was my mother was like, hey, you're the what people mean is you're the best of what he did publicly ministry wise.
Yeah.
A lot of that spiritual language would be mantle, or I think it's just DNA. You have that in you. His
Sure.
father, and Gordo, right over the mountain where I'm at right now. His biological father was a pastor too, so
Wow.
it's in you to do it.
Yeah.
He's like you've got the good stuff about him, and I'm just like, man, that seems treacherous because he was at the best in the height, and then it was so easy for him to snort coke and sleep with other women. So you know what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
it was I struggled with that big time. You know what I
The
mean? And I
snorting
remember
coke and sleeping with other women or the
both.
no, 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 no. No,
But
I think too, as you get older, and you probably know this, it's easier to put it in a clearer context where I almost feel bad for my biological father. Now that I'm 45, it's like, okay, because that as a kid, you're like, you're an adult making this decision. You know all the everything, you know the implications, like how dare you? How could you do this? You're an adult. And then you become an adult and you're like, oh, I really don't know shit. And I'm
not
like, a couple fuck ups away from blowing this whole thing up,
literally.
Yeah. So it's
And,
like that gives it a little context.
and that's what I think. That's what. Um, Here's the thing, though. I get it, and I had grace for him. Like I had the grace, and I talked to him about forgiveness and all of that. What was harder is to hear from the mouth of my mother what he did to her,
Yeah.
and dealing with that as a 38-year-old man and going, I want to kill him, like I want to rip his
Yeah.
head. And
Right.
and no wonder she didn't tell me when he was alive.
Right.
But, and she peeled it back, and she's going, but he's still like he was still everything I told you that he was. And I think I see the duality in me in the sense of like there's times where I just want to wild out, and I
Right.
go, it's that easy.
It
And
is, man.
my resistance to that is no, but life is better when I take care of the things that need to be taken care of.
And that's the miracle that you came from that and you're doing better. That
Yeah,
is the miracle. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
So I mean,
So you guys were able to have a little bit of a relationship before he passed away. Did you have a relationship kind of all the way through, or was it
bro, I don't I put it this way. I don't as a child, I don't remember being around him at those early ages. I moved with him to live with him. My mother, he had left, and my mother was like, "Hey, I'm gonna work this out." And then we went and lived there for about a year,
how old were you when that happened?
7 turning 8.
Do you remember that?
I do, and it made me not like him more. In
Yeah.
fact, I hated the state of California because of it,
Whoa.
because he was like, I don't want to like throw him. I have
Sure.
siblings I don't have a lot of conversation with, but me growing up was remember him watching him huff glue and
Yeah.
smoke weed and have porn all over the house. Right, that was
Wow.
waking up in the middle of the night and he's beating up on his girlfriend, and I'm just, and my oldest brother, reaching down, was like, "It's okay, Ed. It's cool. Just chill. Don't say nothing. Just chill." And listening to him beat up his girlfriend,
Jesus.
and that was, and then we moved like 3 or 4 times in a year, living with different people, and I just remember like, man, I don't know who this dude is, but he's mean. Like
Yeah.
that's just kind of like, I don't know what this is.
Did it
But it's
reinforce your relationship with your mom more, or did it cause you to resent your mom for you living there?
that's a good question. Why are we in therapy right now, nigga?
No, I'm just because I could see it going both ways, where it's
I
like,
think there's a part of me that clung to my mother more,
yeah,
but
like
I
that's your safe person.
yeah, but
Yeah.
she was always on the road too, so that was
Yeah.
part of it. Like, and I've never vocalized this to her, but there's a part of me that's just like, I just wish I was around her more.
Yeah.
Her going on like tours and like weeping for days.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what I'm saying? So, but I understand now she did it because she was trying to provide with,
Sure.
and I see her when we were together, she really made the most of it. If
Yeah.
that makes sense. We
Yeah,
laughed a lot.
absolutely.
Um, my mom's like, she's a she's a woman of, um, she's like real regal when she's out. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, if you see my mom, you're like, yo, she's a dignitary. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But like if you spend time with her in the home, in the heart of our home, she's a clown. Like she's funny. And that's why I think I'm funny,
Yeah.
because collectively just like idiots. And so to
That's
get like
awesome.
make up stuff on it, like dress up and make up skits, so we did a lot of that growing up. So that helped ease the frustration of like her being gone. Is that when she was in, she really, like, we just really lived. If that
Yeah.
makes
Absolutely. Yeah.
lots of like laughing and music. Like it was nothing for my Uncle Jimmy, rest in peace, to be in the house and start playing and making up funny songs. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
sometimes I would, like, when we are interning, like I would make up dumb songs in the moment, but that's like we would do that. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Right.
It was part of that like spontaneity. So that was that element. But I didn't really have a close relationship with my father. I lived with him when I was 8. I didn't see him again until I graduated when I was 18.
Wow.
I didn't see him again until I was like 22 on a missions trip from Master's Commission to the Dream Center. And I was in town. And that's why I was like, hey, I need to forgive you and we need to process that. And so that was when I was 22. And I don't think I didn't see him again until I was 25, when I was living in Las Vegas, and he came up and brought my youngest brother. At that time, he was a shorty, and then my 3 nephews, and then my oldest brother, Junior. And
Wow.
so that's the last time I've seen all of them when I was 25 and 38. And so I invited them to our wedding, and they couldn't make it.
And your oldest brother, he stayed with your dad the whole time.
So my oldest brother was not is not my he's not my full, like, he's not my mom's
Sure.
son. So his mother, and then our other sisters, they live in LA. But my mother, oldest son, his name is Michael. He lived with my father for most of the time growing up.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't remember thinking like fully knowing I had an older brother until I moved to LA. Like I don't remember as a child him being in my memories until I was like 7 or 8 years old.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I didn't remember him until we had our encounters as kids. And
So,
then,
did you grow up with any immediate siblings
oh, for sure.
in rock? Yeah. And how many did you grow up with?
So in house, so my mother only had 3 children herself.
Okay.
My sister Jamesia, um, she had her, and her father passed when Jamesia was young, and then my brother Michael and myself. Michael lived with my father predominantly, and my sister is like 16 years older than me.
Okay.
Um, 16, not can't be 16 years older. Um, I don't want to say her age because I might get punched in the face. But she's much older, like 10 to 12 years older than me.
Sure.
But she and I were really close, and she had a daughter who I'm 4 years older than that we kind of grew up like siblings.
Okay.
And sibling, niece, you know, and then my older sister took care of us. Now my father, my who I call my dad, my stepfather, he had children. And so his youngest two, Rachel and Rashad, we grew up predominantly together.
Okay.
But when I moved back to Minnesota, Mike then moved back with us.
Okay.
So we kind of grew up together. And then there were some adopted children that it's like my sister's friends with my sister would like collect stray kids, but they were hurting families.
Sure.
And my mother has always been like, my mother worked at the alternative school just so she could have impact on the lives of young people.
Yeah.
So she did that for a long time. In between working, singing, she would come home and do that. But when she came back, there were like a couple people that would stay with us from time to time that I would call they were my siblings because growing up I didn't know no better.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of people. So in the house at one time, probably about five of us.
Wow.
And then we had a couple older siblings, my step siblings that would come and stay with us for like summers and stuff, and we would be with them all the time. So I grew up closer um, to my step siblings than I did my actual like my father's children, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when did you determine that you were gonna uh pursue a life in ministry? Was that kind of foretold from
Uh,
your origins, or was there ever like a
I
that was
felt like
something?
I feel like as a young kid, I was like, I'm gonna do what granddad did.
Yeah.
Like when I looked up to him, my hero, and my grandmother really was my hero in ministry. They come from a Baptist expression, so women don't preach. But when you talk about like somebody who spent time really engaging the word and sharing it, not from just a vocal, like I know it, but lived
Yeah.
gospel, as
Yeah.
I would say. Like my grandmother had a big table, and if you came in the house hungry, you were fed.
Yeah.
If you came in the house naked, you were clothed. If you came in the house broken and needed hope, she had all of the words to give to you. There's
Yeah.
times, and she would collect stuff from people. People give her stuff all the time. I was like, I mean, what is all of this crap? And sharing that. There's two times that I can remember vividly where someone had lost everything in the fire in their home, and she furnished an entire apartment, clothes,
Wow.
children for free because she had it. So
Wow.
that's how she lived. Uh,
Yeah.
so grandmother was the kind of like the guiding heart stuff with me. My grandfather was a blueprint because he walks into a room and you just know like this dude's got like, he's got clout. And the
Yeah.
first place he goes, my grandfather loved children. And so when he walks into a room, before he really engaged, he'll say hi to all the adults, but he's going to make sure every child in that room is seen. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah. No, yeah.
you see me do like if there's a kid,
Yeah.
like I love the parents, but I'm going to engage with the child because I want to make sure kids know that they're seen. And then let's relate. You know what I mean? I'm gonna talk to the families. It's not like I'm gonna come in and like I'm not a pedophile. I'm like, yo, kids, let me.
No, but it's an upside down kingdom. So it's like, this is the future. This is who we're doing everything for. Yeah, no, I get it.
So my grandfather built a church on loving my grandfather and grandpa together built a church on my grandmother loving congregation, being wise and having that. She was the most wise person I ever knew. The loving people and taking care of needs, and my grandfather loving children and the next generation of people. So he grew a church that way. And so that was kind of like, hey, I'm gonna do that. And I
Yeah.
think as I grew up, I saw the underbelly of it all. I saw how people took advantage of my grandparents. I saw the freedom stripped of them because you live a very public life, when you're in ministry, even if
Yeah.
you're in a small church or large church. The dynamics may be different, but it's the same in the
Oh
sense
yeah.
of very public life. People feel like they can say whatever they want to you. They can walk in on you, and you just better be ready because whether you like it or not, you're my pastor, and this is what I have the right to do.
Yeah.
And so I kind of saw that, and I saw the hurt that it caused my sister when she got pregnant and had to, and she shared her story of like having to, repent in front of the entire congregation and how embarrassing
Jeez. Yeah.
because it's you're protecting the ego and so there are things like that. And I just go, man, I don't know that this is for me. Because I know the pain of the stress of anxiety of my mother um smoking at the counter because they're really processing what's happening around her, even as a gospel singer.
Yeah.
And not even that, but family feel like they have to right to share what they think would be the best thing for you to do.
Right.
And when you're in ministry roles, not only do you have to care for the spiritual life of people that you serve, but your own family has a dynamic of spiritual weight that you have to contend with. I
And
see it.
everybody has their own perception of what a minister or pastor should be, should do,
Yep.
should act like, and they project all of that on you. And the closer they are to you, the more comfortable they feel, kind of giving you, like, you automatically take this status of like, all right, we got to pull this dude back down to earth because he feels like he's better than everybody. It's like quite the opposite.
And I've had the pleasure of having really good friends. Like there's a circle of people that you would all know their names. Like, and I would include you even in that, even though like I don't see Jeff, every once a year, but it's one of those things where you go, man, I can have honest conversation and dialogue about life, culture, faith, and what's really bothering me. And they're either going to tell me, hey, there's something to that, or they're going to, hey, you're being a little B. Like, stop acting.
Sure.
So me, that's Matt Zachary, Aaron Lee, Andre Anderson, Drizzy, Corey Lee. Like,
Yeah.
it's just a group of people that's going, they stopped that. Like,
Now, interesting because you named everybody you named was a black person who was affiliated with Rockford
yeah,
Church. So did that kind of galvanize in that world? And what was it like in that world as a black person before I feel like the nation started really paying attention to like, oh shit, things are different. It's a different experience in
yeah.
this country for people of color.
I think I struggled. I struggled. And if you go back and look, I struggled those first 2 years
Yeah.
because it was a like Eurocentric evangelical expression.
It
Although
was
I've been,
almost like new ministry too, because what you're
yeah,
talking about with your grandparents, that's the old school. There's no
yeah,
frills. There's no upside to it other than treasure stored in heaven where they will not rot. Which if
yeah.
you know and you believe, that's all you need.
My
But
grandpa's been in the same community, committed for over 50 years. And
yeah,
it's an impoverished community. It's
right.
I grew up on the South Side, like walking to the park. You feel me? Like
Right.
that's where we at. You know what I'm saying? So I think there were gaps that weren't filled, and there wasn't grace extended to help me catch up with or understanding of like, hey, this is what it is. It's like, hey, you're in or you're out. And if you look at my track record, the people that I spent the most time with were dudes who were mad real and could have real conversations with me.
Yeah.
You, Don Vargas, Andre, lots of Matt Zachary. That like, if you looked at that's like that just kind of time period, there were groups of guys that I felt so oddly out of place with that I couldn't like I felt just out of place at all times. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? There's times where like there were some people that were ahead of me in my internship that made me feel real small. And to this day, it's hard for me to have real conversations with them. And I've never openly said this in a public space like this, but there's some people that like I didn't have language for it then.
Sure.
I avoided them or whatever they did. I was like, I'm not trying to do that. And you
Right.
were making me feel very small. And I was like, well, I'm gonna just do it then. I would make up excuses not to be around them for long periods of time because I didn't feel protected. I didn't
Right.
feel wanted. I felt like very looked down on. And there were just pieces missing to things that they had culturally that did not make sense that I felt like were unnecessary for me,
Yeah.
but made to feel like, you're idiot or you're dumb or you don't understand this. And so I had a rough time for 2 years. And I spent a lot of time with you, like doing the comedy joint,
Yeah.
going watching the Cubs games and just letting me cook. Like Eddie's bringing all the hot dogs. Do it, bro.
Right.
It was very much like, hey, just be you. And
Yeah.
and what bothered me is I felt like nobody just stopped to really have a conversation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it was like, so I had problems with that. But there was also the dynamic in my home where I was still living with my granddad. I was like, you hang with all them white people. I was like, but I'm called. Like this isn't like I don't get to choose this. Like this is what the door was open to, and I feel like God moved me in that direction. And I'm grateful for it. I'm not complaining about
Absolutely. Sure.
it, but it's made me a whole lot more aware when everything happened around the nation and all this stuff kind of opened up. I think I had a unique perspective because I finally had language of what
Yeah.
I felt. But even in that feeling, I've found ways to kind of bridge the gap for some people and just go, hey, don't talk to people like that. Or hey, make sure you're thinking about this. It was never like, don't think about it because you're black. I'm going, hey, think about people more than just.
Right.
And that was my language and conversation. But on the world stage in the last couple of years, it became magnified. But I had already started doing the work with a lot of communities. Go, hey, you need to be aware that there are other people who don't think or look like you that are coming to our church and showing up, and you're not meeting their needs. So I've had conversations like that that's helped churches, but I never made it a black and white thing. Does that make sense?
No,
And
yeah,
I'm
for sure.
wrong or right, but I also grew up in a home where we were very cultured, so we experienced a lot of people. So my perspective, although I want to be aware of the struggle of my people in particular, I'm also gospel centered in that I take on the life of other cultures because I have to see through that lens
Yeah.
of we're bringing more people to the table than that just look like me. And even here being that everybody's Latin American or Latinx or whatever you want, Hispanic, um, my perspective doesn't count as much. Being black, although it's valued,
Sure.
the needs of my community are reflective of the people of the community.
Yeah.
But because I am, and I can be authentically me, we've actually got a huge black population of people attending our church now, which is I would attribute to both my authenticity, but Paul valuing and championing that, but also putting that on display.
Yeah.
You know what
I
I'm saying?
mean, yeah, I used to always I would tell people I hate worship services. I fucking hated them. And it always felt like blasphemy to people, because they're like something magical happens in worship. I'm like, this is the most like easy listening Caucasian shit on the planet. Like this has no soul. This has no, not all of it. I mean, there were moments where I really feel like there were authentic moments, but for the most part, it was just this drab key change, that like Christian soft rock. And it's like this isn't the anointing.
Bro, I've been to so many different versions, and
Yeah, I bet.
look what white people can do. It's just like, great.
Now
This,
that's what I call gospel.
this, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I've had the joy and the pleasure and the privilege of being in places where they embrace stylistically gospel music, but they also go, hey, there's some people in our community that do this better than us, and we need them on our stage.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
shun choirs, but the Black soul, and we're communal in everything that we do.
Yeah.
There are very few things that are highly individualistic. I think the generation coming up is more individualistic than they've ever been as far as Black community goes. But I think we're naturally communal. And I think choirs and why we love them speak to that.
Yeah.
That's why I believe we had the first, like, real boy bands, like before you had New Kids on the Block.
Right.
You
Right.
know what I'm saying? Like, so
New edition.
yeah,
Jackson 5.
there's something about Black community that's highly communal. Um, and I think people, if churches are in Black communities or even Latin Spanish speaking communities, like embrace more than less, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And they can, those communities, I mean, growing up in a poor neighborhood, a poor town, really. I mean, I was thinking about it today. I was like,
Word, son.
my parents didn't drink, my whole town drank. Like the whole town of
Yeah.
adults drank collectively. It wasn't just like, oh, my parents were drinking. It was like, no, the whole fucking town drank.
But I
Um,
had to like, I had to get used to that too, though, because I grew up where I knew of gospel musicians and singers that had a beer, and I feel like stepping into the world of white was like, we don't do all those things.
no, 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 no.
I was like, I get it because I've seen what it does to people, but all right, cool. That's the tribe.
But when you
I'm
build the fence like they do, it only makes it more A, appealing, but B, to your point earlier that you said about your sister, um, it just becomes like this behavior modification. You got to present yourself as perfect, and then you can receive the gospel. It's like that's the opposite of everything in that fucking book. Like everything. Um, yeah, that was I think that's when I left was after First Assembly. I got to a church in Belvedere and the pastor was like, I won't say his name. You might know him. You definitely know his daughter, because she went to Christian Life. But um, maybe I've said too much. But he was like actively jealous that when I spoke, like people responded well to me speaking and like rebuked me for it. Was like, I'm the spiritual head. I'm like, dude, I'm not in competition with you. It was like, you know what? Fuck this, man. Like, I'm out. If this is the gospel, I'm out. And it, it it's a blessing and a curse. And I really do feel like God led me away from that world because the beauty from my own personal experience, and I don't subscribe to like any major religion, but there's an old Rastafarian shaman that was like, do you believe in God? And the guy's like, yeah. And he's like, then you don't know God. Because if you know God, you don't believe in him, you know him. And I
Mm.
was like, that's me. Like I can battle it all I want, but I know. But everything that man has kind of created around it is like, I see
Yeah,
money, I see money, I see money, and that's when
I think it's just a Western.
totally, totally. But
I think
where I came to, and this is where God is like a genius, obviously, I would like almost had this script of like why I hated church, why I hated mega churches. And God was like, what you judge the church about doing and not doing, you're judging yourself about doing or not doing because you don't need a church to do these things that you're rebuking them for doing and not doing. I'm like, oh, well, damn. Yeah,
I just the Western perspective is the building is where you go, and that's church. Um, I value community more than ever.
totally.
My I do work for churches. I still believe in the church. Obviously, I wasn't going to be doing it. Um, but I think my switch is I've seen enough. I grew up in churches. I've seen enough churches to go, hey, everybody's got this really broken perspective thing, and it's I think it's being shattered more now. And I think a lot of churches are going, hey, we really, really didn't get this right.
Yeah.
Um, we really dropped the ball in some areas, and we lost influence in our communities because we didn't care enough about our community as we cared about seats in our building.
Yeah. Even Creflo walked some of that back
Yeah,
recently. Yeah.
it was, but that was unfortunately the most unfortunate and the most fortunate is is if a pattern's going one way and everybody sees success in it, that's what they're choosing.
Oh yeah, totally.
You know what I'm saying? Like it that I mean, that's just true of human nature.
Right.
If there's a pattern where I can have success, then I choose the pattern until I find out that that pattern has done more harm. Whether people cried foul early on, go, hey, this isn't right, this isn't right. But people could validate themselves because you would use the phrase, well, you judge a tree by its fruit.
Right.
Instead of walking that back, going, hey, it wasn't about the fruit, it was about the quality of the fruit. And
Yeah.
so how are you is this fruit appetizing is the question. And so is it adding value, and so now people have to re-look at it and go, okay, the things that we value and validate ourselves by, or saying, hey, we're actually doing gospel work. Is it really lives are being changed and communities are being impacted, or are salaries bigger and there are more seats in our church than the church across town?
Right.
I think one of the biggest dynamics that I loved about Paul and why I'm here, because this is the middle of nowhere, dog. Like, oh, is that he really cares. This this has been one of the most like life-giving places I've ever been.
That's awesome, man.
All of my entire life, simply because there was a pastor who cared more about my personal life than how many people I brought in on a Wednesday night, young people.
Isn't that crazy though?
Like his words to me was like, Eddie, you can be here. You can be here 2 years. I could care less. But when you leave this place, you'll be better than when you walked in.
Yeah.
That were his words. And he goes, I want you to do it with me forever. But pause. I want you to be with us forever. But he was like, hey, if you're down, like, I want you to be healthy. And so because of that, because I'm healthy, because I have more time with my family, because I have more time with my children,
You're not
because
earning your spot every day.
yo,
Right.
legit.
Right.
Like that right there alone, from the last church to this, is I'm a valued member of the community of leadership, but also on the level of friendship where he's going, hey, I don't want to work you to death. He literally goes, I just want you to know that you're not, Jesus isn't a product that you're trying to sell.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can live the life of love that Jesus loved when he saw people, then you'd be doing the best job here.
That's
And it was
awesome.
hard for me to process more people in a room to how do we take the quality of life and raise it in people. And by what's funny is um the better my leaders are that I take care of and spend time with regularly, the better the community of students. Like I have students who, like, I'm a youth pastor. So I have, when I flip my philosophy, there are actually kids that have never walked through the doors of our church who regularly spend time with me because they're looking for somebody that is safe and will just listen.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
they just go, they call me Uncle Eddie. Like these are kids that like they're not going to church. Like they could care less about the things of God, and they just go, that's Uncle Eddie. He's safe.
Right.
Be with them. Like,
That's the gospel, man.
you know what
That's
I'm saying?
it.
Once that dynamic flipped, I really was like, yo, this is, and I've written it a couple times out, like best job I've ever had, because I've truly can live and understand that I'm living from my gift, my natural personality. I felt like in places I couldn't use my personality to my benefit.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, you just like to laugh and like to joke and like to, and I can I can be both playful and profound here, so that I can love and be funny and take care of people, but when I have something to say, I can switch the dynamic of room pretty swiftly, but that it's only come with the confidence of knowing who I am.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
it's done with me and walking with me and encouraging me. Um, but his leadership of going, hey, it's people first. Like it really is people first, and because of that, because he really is people first, people are intrigued.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
They're, they're,
that's what people want,
yeah,
especially, when they're seeking. It's
yeah,
usually not at a high point in their life. So
nah,
going into a building and just hearing like, "Hey, give us some money."
nah,
Yeah.
nah. He's
Well, that's awesome. I got to jump off here cuz I got to go sleep in front of my son's crib, but I was awesome to catch up. We got to do a part 2, but before we go, I just want to ask you to the 100 or so listeners regularly of this podcast, do you have any pearls of wisdom that you want to bestow on them?
yeah. I, I don't have overwhelming wisdom. I want to live life simply, and I simply want to love people. You're valuable because of you existed. You
Yeah.
don't have to because of what you do or what you build or what you think people should remember you by. I think what you give to the world is the best version of you by taking care of yourself, but also taking care of the people that God puts in front of you. And so live life simply. I think I think we make it complex because the world's complex and people are complex. But if you can live life simply by simply loving who's in front of you, I think you'll change the world for a significant amount of people because
Amen.
you walk today. So that's what I would say.
That's awesome. I keep thinking about the part where it says, "In heaven you will know as you are known." And
Mm,
like I've always loved the idea of belonging to a place where I am known. Like you're
yeah,
talking about, like I can be
yeah,
the full spectrum of myself. I don't have to just be the funny guy because the other
no.
shit is too weird, or too like lofty.
But I think
Like
that's why I love you. I think that's why I still true. Like if you really called me and said, "Yeah, I'm in a pinch," I go, "I got you," is
same.
because there was a camaraderie where we're just like, "Yo, this is us." Like this is, and those relationships I can call, and there is no, I gotta walk through the mud, or I gotta do all the small talk to go see if we're still cool. But the
Yeah.
ones that you lived with, truly lived with, you can call them like, yo, jump on this.
Yep.
We ain't talking 6 years, yo. This is what I'm doing. You in? I'll say less because you're my guy.
Right.
So if you know who you truly live with by the response you get if you're not talking to them in 5 years.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Shout out to
Absolutely.
people you're just like, I don't know. But the people that was real with you when you needed them to be real and you could be real, you go, yeah, I got you. So
And
yeah,
that's, I think, with the reconstructing or whatever this is part of it, it's the
yeah,
beauty of it is it's like you get to pick whoever you want on your team. You're not restricted by like, well, he works for that church or he works for that. No, it's like these are solid people. Let's just
yes,
get it together
yes,
and figure
yep,
it out. Yeah.
yep. That's it. Solid people, real people. Don't be a fake, bro.
That's
Yeah,
right. That's right. Well, man, it was great catching up with you. We got to do a part 2.
damn.
All right, man. I love you. It was great seeing you.
Good to see you, man.
Well, I got to get down to New Mexico. I got two brothers down there, man.
Say less. Come to the hood.
I will for sure. I will for sure, man.
Maybe I
All right.
cuss.
Best to your family, bro.
All right, bro. Love you,
All
man.
right. Love you.